Okay, I'd like to go ahead and open this meeting for May 19th with a prayer and a pledge. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Mel.
You're welcome.
We'll have a roll call, please. Mrs. Carla? Okay, you're on mute too. Okay.
Yeah, I know my screen went really tiny. I'm sorry. Hold on. Here
It's
we go.
okay. I can do it if you want.
Mr. Powell.
Here.
All right. Mr. Gertz.
Here.
Mr. Lynn.
Here.
Mr. Albrink.
Here.
Mr. Lindeman.
Here.
Mr. Fischescher.
Here.
Mrs. Edichico.
Here.
All present. Okay. Again, I don't have any minutes that I've sent out. I have been working on one of them, but I'll get them out for after this meeting for the first meeting in May. Audience participation, was there anything that came in the mail? No? Okay. Reading of any communications?
No.
I'd like to go to the council committee reports then, and Finance Committee Chairman, Mr. Gertz.
Thank you, Mr. President. First, I'd like to extend my sympathy. We lost a city employee this past 10 days or so. I'm going to mispronounce his name, but he was a very loyal person that I know worked with the water department. I believe is pronounced John Bucaccio. I hope that's correct. But they left, I believe, 3 children. So keep their family in our prayers. And I guess we'll be looking to decide, I guess, whether we have to do something for a replacement there, because he was a valuable employee, I know, working in the water department. So wanted to start out with doing that expression of sympathy and prayers that we should extend, which was not part of finance, but I think was important. As far as finance, we have been meeting. I'm not going to steal the thunder, although Sabrina will not be there this evening. I think Mel will report on it. He's been setting these meetings up every couple of weeks to do an analysis and see where we are with our finances concerning the extension of our taxes to July. And I think it's a matter of us trying to gather where we can pull some money. As you're all well aware, maybe the citizens are not, we have extended the authority for them to investigate methods of borrowing funds, if necessary, through local banking institutions, something on the nature of saying an equine loan wouldn't be, I don't think we're going to have to issue any bonds or anything of that nature, but where we could gather money quickly if we had to, if we get ourselves in a jam. We certainly don't want to see ourselves in a position like I think the city of Cincinnati, if I'm correct, had to furlough 1,700 people down there. Fortunately, I think we're holding our own, we're meeting our obligations. But in reviewing the various funds, there was some discussion, and I brought it up in that telephone conversation, casual conversation with Mr. Lindeman. We do have some places we can draw some money. For instance, as there's an ordinance I mentioned I would put on the floor and hope the council would see favorably to do it, to move $100,000 from the stadium fund to the general fund. I believe most of those monies that are in there were monies that were put in there for maintenance of the property anyway, and probably should have been in the general fund because we have been paying for the maintenance of the stadium out of the general fund over the last several years. We also have an ability to draw from the sewer service fee fund, which currently has an unencumbered balance of $562,000, almost $63,000. I don't have anything on there currently to draw from there because in our discussion, I think the treasurer will report, we may not be in as dire straits as we anticipated from the last meeting. But nevertheless, if we have to do something in an emergency, we could draw those funds. Now the law director will have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we can use those in any other portions of the city government. And as he pointed out in the past, even if we were to just borrow money from various funds, we could do that internally. It just makes it a little more cumbersome, I think. For instance, there's an unencumbered balance in the Streets and Curbs Fund of $1 million. So if we had to immediately borrow some money from within, we can do that. But I think that if we do that, we need to prepare the necessary documentation to secure the protection that those monies would go back into that fund. The reason that has that kind of money is that we spent about $1 million on ingress and egress and infrastructure when we opened up the school up there with the reconstruction of Benson Street, Columbia Avenue, and so forth, and traffic controls. So right now, those are the main issues that I have concerns in the finance committee. But water, not water we consume, but as you're all well aware, we've had a lot of water, and it's in my ward that we tend to it all ultimately exits down into my neighborhoods. So I did go around and look at many parts of the valley today, and I appreciate Don Lindeman. He also probably pushed me to do it, but he came down and we went around to let him report more in detail about some of the things that relate to actual capital project that I wish was farther underway. That being the construction of the bench on the north end. We have some additional problems apparently that have cropped up. But just so people understand, as Mr. Albrink would be well aware, and those that have looked back many years ago, there's been numerous new sewers constructed to help alleviate this for our area. Even Benson Street, when we did the major improvement of going down Benson Street in 1983 and did the street escape project, there's a 5-foot diameter new sewer that was put down through there. Had that not been installed, I think most of the businesses on Benson Street this past couple of days would have been flooded. That doesn't really alleviate those who have suffered, and there are numerous areas. But as I was talking to Don, they are working correctly. The sewers that we have constructed have flap gates on them, so that, and I don't know how many of you got a chance to go down and look at the Mill Creek, but it's about as high as I've seen it in many, many years. I don't know if it's been the highest I've ever seen it, but it certainly is in a catastrophic kind of a position. The flap gates actually are designed to close, so the water that's percolating up out of places like in the middle of Canning Park or in certain areas of the BYO play fields, or even in neighborhoods, you see water percolating up out of the sewer that are there. That's working correctly, ironically, because the flap gates, if they didn't work, then all the water in the creek would just start flowing back up into in a much heavier fashion into the valley areas where it used to flood almost on a constant basis many years ago before we constructed many new sewers. That doesn't mean we don't have a lot of progress that we need to pursue in solving these problems. But anyway, I regret that many of the citizens are probably not as many as in the past, but certainly if one person has got their basement full of water, it's not a happy condition that we want to acquiesce to saying it's okay. So I know that the city crews are out. We saw them ourselves in numerous areas where streets were blocked off, Fenton Avenue, Walkendorf Street, Bradley, part of Jefferson Avenue, so forth. I think they're all opened up now. I may be wrong. I didn't get any time to go back out and examine it. Let's say some prayers that the Lord, and if we need the rain, that's fine, but let's put it over a little, spread it out a little more than all coming at once. So I do have some other things I'd like to report on later in the meeting, but that's all I have on finance. I don't know if there's any questions or comments, but I'm welcome to hear.
No comments from anyone? No questions?
I do have a question,
Go
Terry.
ahead, Mr. Powell.
What is the unencumbered balance in the stadium fund right now?
111. Well, I think it's around 100 and 111, almost 112,000.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Gertz.
Just to clarify that, if we move 100,000, there'll only be the 11, of course.
Yeah.
Where did we get that money from?
Those funds, it's my understanding, were put into that account based upon receipts that we have received over the last several years. We were getting approximately 25,000 the last 2 or 3 years from the Reading School District for the maintenance that we do up there. And it was my understanding from the research that I know to date that it was put into the stadium fund, but that fund many years ago, Denny, I don't think you were there then, actually, I forgot. But many years ago, there was an effort to establish that stadium fund. That my recollection was to have the school and the city contribute to capital improvements, primarily someday to redo the track that had to be done. And at that time, we had just recompleted the track. We did it over, it's got to be 20 years ago or more, maybe 25. Well, you were here then. But anyway, the track has got some problems with it, but I don't know the extent of the need of repair. But the stadium fund was originally established. I think there was a certain percentage. I think the school was going to put 40% into it, the city 60%, because it was the facility was being used for multiple tenants. It was not a single tenant. Currently, it's a single tenant, basically being the school system now, Reading school system. So it was more of a capital fund, my recollection, not a maintenance fund.
Okay. I thank you, Mr. Gertz. Utilities, Lands, and Buildings, Chairman, Mr. Lindeman.
Thank you, Chris. Just to follow up on that, just a moment. It seems that the lease agreements that we had with the Little League football and the Ursuline Academy, those agreements, it seemed like that money was put into the stadium fund. And I agree, I think it should have gone into the general fund, because purpose for those monies was to maintain the field, to clean up the stadium after they had a sporting event, general maintenance, at the stadium. So those a lot of those maintenance issues are done by the Public Works Department. So the money should have gone into the general fund, and then some of the budget for public works should have been taken out of there for the maintenance of the stadium. Anyway, I did talk to Bennett Kotler about the bench project, Tony. And
Okay.
it's on the north end of the DYO fields, parallel to Riesenberg Lane. It seems that there's another delay. I sound like a broken record because it goes on and on and on, one thing after another, that we have to get it in the spring. We're going to do it in the winter. We're going to do it in the fall. Anyway, the latest delay seems to be with the disposal site again. They, I don't know why they just discovered that there's asbestos over there on that, in the area of Philip Carey, where they had a plant that made shingles, and they used asbestos as part of the material so that it would be fire resistant and insulating. So anyway, it's been that business was over there probably 80 years or more, and it's been several years since they tore all that down. And I'm just flabbergasted, and I mentioned it to Bennett that why all of a sudden now are we talking about this asbestos for a delay in this project? And the other thing is, and that may be worked out. He said that we are working on that, and it may be worked out, and that may be the site where this 800 truckloads of dirt will be dumped. they had, and I said it myself, only repeating what I heard, was that they had a backup site at Gorman Farms in Evendale. But they tell me now that that's only 40 or 50 truckloads, 5% or less of the 800 truckloads. So that's not really going anywhere. So I just hope that that this project doesn't follow in the footsteps of the project that we had at Canning Park for restoring the restrooms down there, and then eventually it just went by the wayside, and we had to do something else. So it's been several years, and I understand from Patrick. I'm not sure if he's on here tonight or not, but I talked to him Friday. He was on his way out of town, and he said that that they have extended this project. I believe that's extended is what I think he said. Anyway, so we'll just have to stay tuned and hope. I did call the mayor and talk to Bo about possibility of any sites in Reading. I certainly am familiar with many of the sites that are owned by the city of Reading, and I can't see any of them that would be able to take any number of truckloads, let alone 800 truckloads. But you know, he's been mayor for 20 years, so I asked him if he knew of any areas at all that we might be able to improve some, like for instance, the up behind Hilltop School, where the pavilion is. There's several acres back there, and I think Mr. Gertz is very familiar with that. It's a ravine. Whether or not we could do something up there with this 800 truckloads of dirt to improve that site, I don't know. But he said that the mayor said that he would look into it and see if he can come up with anything. So if any of you, I mean, Denny and Tony, been around a long time. So if you have any sites that you think might be able to use some of this dirt, now would be a good time to say so.
Hey, Don.
Yes.
Sometime back, I think maybe back in October, I had mentioned to Pat the new roundabout they're constructing at the where Ronald Reagan deads in into Montgomery Road, and it's going to require a significant amount of fill. And I had provided to him the, I guess, construction manager's contact and all of that for that, and he had passed it on to the construction manager who was going to be handling the project. Do you know if they ever spoke with Montgomery about that?
I don't know anything about that, Dave, but that's the kind of thought that I think would be worthwhile pursuing. Mr. Cutler said that they were looking into Rumpke way out Coleraine Township or something, which would add a lot of expense to the diesel fuel that it would take to get those out there and the time it would take. So
yeah, Montgomery's a whole lot closer to that.
It would be.
Another place that I know takes fill that is, in a little area called Remington. So if you would take Remington Road out of Montgomery and just over the Little Miami River, there's a little fill operation there that accepts fill dirt as well. Now, I don't know what the cost to dump there would be, but that's definitely a lot closer than Rumpke as well.
Sure, that's great. That's great. And I know that last week Patrick was at least watching the council meeting, or the last council meeting we had. He was at least watching. So if he is watching, that's good information. And maybe if you wouldn't mind, Dave, in case he's not, passing that information along to him again.
Okay, I
So
will. Don.
it would move the project along if we knew where the dirt was destined for.
Yeah, well, I brought it up in October, but I'll be happy to bring it up again. So,
Thank you. That's all I have, Chris.
I'd like to comment if I could, Mr. Linden, if I may, or who else is somebody up? Somebody else up, or can I comment on this?
Go ahead, Tony.
it's very, to be blunt, it's very frustrating to me. This project started 3 years ago and got the grant, about 390,000 or something like that. And it was rather interesting. I saw some pictures where people were looking at Canning Park being flooded and Weeby Fieldhouse being flooded. And ironically, that's what this bench does. It on the north end of the BYOHP field house or fields is where this property was going to be designed, if I'm correct. We looked at it today, and that's when you take out 800 truckloads of dirt and you design it to have a quick drainage after the rain. The water is designed to flood that area, to come out of the creek and flood that area. That's what a bench does. Actually, the one probably most knowledgeable around us is Bob Ashrock. He got to know the guy that we eventually got the study from, and then went after this grant. But the Canning Park, it's better for Canning Park and VYO Fields and this bench to flood than people getting it in their basements. And I am a little bit, to be candid and outspoken, is this has taken way too long. I mean, it's, to be frank with you, these explorations of locations, in my opinion, should have been aggressively done. This grant's been available to proceed for at least a year or so since we've got it. This is about the third extension or more of trying to find a location. Well, you know, it's just frustrating to me because now my constituents are down on Bradley Avenue, Walkendorf Street, you know, down on Southern Avenue, Gebhard Avenue, and Jefferson Avenue are all getting water, and then Fenton Avenue, that was flooded all today. You couldn't get through. It would have been better if all, now whether this bench, it's not a end all, it's one step and a ultimate flood control problem that exists with us. All these new sewers have been put in for the last 40 years, is fine, but the water can't get into the creek because the creek is so high it shuts off the gates on the pipes going into the creek. So the bench would actually allow the amount of water that's coming down the creek to flood areas that are basically fallow land, and lower the actual height of the water, and let the sewer systems be more efficient. And that's, like I say, one step. There's probably 4 or 5 other projects, but we can't even get this one off the ground. And it's frustrating to me because these are my neighbors, people I've known for, you know, my 75 years. Yeah, Albrank, I know, I finally admit it. But it's frustrating to me that this is still taking this long. It would have been very handy. I don't know how much it would have solved today if that bench existed, but I think it would have been better than what we got. Thanks.
Chris, I think it's back to you.
Did hit the mute. I'm sorry about that. Thank you, Mr. Lindeman. Zoning, Planning, and Environment, Chairman, Mr. Powell.
Made a couple of contacts dealing with the grocery ads that were in the street, and I'm happy to report on Saturday when I drove the street after they came down, I didn't see any in the street. I don't know if anybody else had noticed any improvement or not. The other thing, I mean, it's of course baby steps, but I think this is the first step in the process there. So that was really all I had to report this evening.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Powell? Thank you, Mr. Powell. Zoning, laws and contracts, Chairwoman, Ms. Edichico.
Thanks, Chris. Kind of piggybacking off of what Mr. Powell just said, I contacted Patrick about we were wondering if there was an ordinance regarding them passing out the door stores or penny savers. And he did forward that on to Mr. Stevenson. I don't know if you saw that or not. But I did look through the code of ordinances and I couldn't find anything directly relating to the door stores or newspapers or how they're distributed. What I did find is some information in section 1426.10 regarding exterior property maintenance. In section B6, it states that that the exterior property maintenance official is responsible for administrating anti-littering programs and efforts to keep sidewalks and the right-of-way free of litter and debris. I also found some information in section 1070.01 regarding trash and recyclable materials. So basically, it looks like it's the homeowner's responsibility to dispose of the door stores if they're thrown onto their property, and that if folks notice that they're piling up on sidewalks or in streets, to contact the exterior property maintenance official, which is Rick Martin. So I could have missed an ordinance regarding the distribution of newspapers. I did several searches using a lot of different keywords and couldn't find a specific ordinance. So I don't know, Mr. Stevenson, if there's anything that I missed that you would know of.
No, I don't think you missed anything, Katie. This is not an activity that we're going to be able to outright ban, and it really is up to the property owner to take care of it. I understand that they are annoying. I've never really appreciated them throwing them in my driveway, but I'm not the only one in my house who deals with those things, and some people here like them. So it's really not a heck of a lot different than the Inquirer and the other papers that are delivered. So, and Mel, you just got my nose.
And other than that, that's all I had for tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Adichico. Public Health and Safety Chairman, Mr. Fischescher.
Thank you, Chris. I too would like to extend my sincere sympathy to the family of John Bajuki. As Tony stated, he passed away unexpectedly May 11th. John was recently promoted to manager of our water department, so he's truly going to be missed. The other aspect of this is being a small city, all of our departments work side by side on a regular basis and share a common camaraderie. So his passing touches not only his fellow service department personnel, but also all of our employees. I'd like to extend our condolences and sympathy to those guys too. The other thing Tony mentioned was the Mill Creek continues to rise even as we're meeting here, with a lot of people getting flooded during this crisis. If you believe that you have had a backup through your sanitary sewer system, you must call the MSD Sanitary Sewer Backup Program within 24 hours of discovery. Their number is 352-4900. It's 352-4900. Also, the City Works, Public Works Garage will be open tomorrow through Friday from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. each day for residents to bring any water damaged items from your homes. I'm sure Dennis will probably have a little bit more on that in his report. As for the safety committee itself, I have two ordinances on the agenda this evening. Both are for necessary equipment for the fire department and have been planned, anticipated, and discussed earlier in both the safety committee and in this council. The first is for the purchase of mobile data communications, cellular networking, and wireless router equipment to replace existing obsolete 800 megahertz mobile data equipment. The existing mobile data equipment will be converted from data to voice radio and installed in the mobile units for voice communication purposes. The cost of this will not exceed $8,500 and will be taken from the Fire EMS Capital Improvement Fund. The second ordinance is for a pro respirator fit tester. This is used to assure proper user fit of self-contained breathing apparatus, face pieces, and air purifying respirator masks utilized when responding to incidents with dangerous atmospheres which pose respiratory risk to responding personnel. This cost will not exceed $11,000 and will also be taken from the Fire EMS Capital Improvement Fund. I realize this is not the best time for major purchases, but both purchases are necessary equipment to keep our department safe and operational. Finally, I would like to wish everyone an enjoyable Memorial Day. Unfortunately, there will be no parade, formal services, or festival this year, but that still doesn't stop us from taking time out of our day to remember all those who have made the ultimate sacrifice to protect our freedom. That's all I have, Chris.
Mr. Lindeman.
Randy, I appreciate you bringing up that phone number for MSD, but as Mr. Gertz and I went around and talked to some of the individuals that had some water damage this morning, I found out that the phone number has just been inundated with calls. So I would suggest that, and I apologize, I don't have their email address. You may have, but you might want to go online if possible, just to let them know that you fit in that 24-hour period, because the phones are, as you can imagine, tied up. Try the email address. Sorry, I don't have it.
That's a good
I
point.
don't either, Don. I just had that as a side note because I thought probably that you would be discussing it.
Any other questions for Mr.?
I had a quick question.
Go ahead, Mr. Gertz.
Off the line or out. I've been watching, well, I only watch Fox News. I wouldn't need any other thing on television if I could get that without having to pay for it. But there's a lot of new test equipment for the coronavirus that's available. Randy, I didn't know in the safety department whether the fire department or anybody has explored whether or not residents had an opportunity if they wanted to do it on their own rather than, I heard there's some new things out that you can purchase yourself. Are you familiar with any of that in the safety department?
Not at all, Tony. I know that the fire department, as far as protective equipment for themselves, are in pretty good shape right now because I've checked periodically with Chief Owens to make sure that they had enough personal protective equipment, masks, and whatnot. It's hard to say, and there's a lot of misinformation out there too, with regard to things that are working, things that don't. And all you have to do is get online and Google whether you should wear a mask or not. And half the doctors say you should, and half say you shouldn't because you're building up a moist barrier around your face that you're breathing in bacteria. And so, it's a toss-up as to what you do. But as far as other equipment, I look for stuff all the time. Every time I'm in a store or something, I'm looking for mostly masks because masks are hard to come by. Found out tonight that I eventually got to go out and get a new thermometer because they're going to start taking temperatures at my work, and that's going to be an issue. I think it's frustrating because I think, they're kind of taking this in steps and trying to figure it out as they go along, and not, it's no fault of theirs. Nobody's dealt with it like this before, but in doing that, it seems like there's conflicting information. So, the best bet is to go online. It's Ohio COVID19.com, I believe it is. I was on that website today for probably an hour looking at a couple of different things, but that's where the most up-to-date information is, and it's a pretty easy site to work with. You can do a lot of searches on there and get your answers there.
I just heard that Abbott or somebody produced a test equipment that would be you can learn within 10 to 15 minutes. I don't know whether it was
oh yeah, I know what you're talking about now. Yeah. No, I don't think that's really out there yet available. I think there's there are certain places that are using it, but you know, if it's, Todd's pretty good about staying on top of that. If it becomes available, I'm pretty sure he'd be after it.
Well, I know it's for the older people and you got to worry the most, but at my age, I don't think I have to be as concerned like the younger people are not to be as concerned, you know?
Yeah. Okay.
Don, I just looked up the Metropolitan Sewer District to contact them. And actually, it looks like you can go right to their website, which is msdgc.org, and you can submit a request online if you have a sewer backup directly through their website.
Thank you, Katie. I appreciate it. I'm sure there will be a number of people out there that will use that. I just want to mention, as far as the masks are concerned, that the little crepe, I don't know what the name of it is, Tony, little restaurant that sells crepes. They also have masks there. They're selling $5.
Oh, yeah, up the street here. I know you mean, yeah. Well, the Reading schools they got them with their emblem on the front of them, you know. Nice.
that's
Yeah,
nice.
you can.
They were selling masks and Make America Great Again. He's got masks out. Donald does. So I don't know. I got a mask. People said
I've got about 3
a lot
of
of
them.
people said I look better if I wear the mask.
Yeah, I'd like to see someone put up on the Reading website, if Patrick, if you're listening, some of this information for the Metropolitan Sewer District for people to send in their requests or phone numbers or whatever else. There's some cleanup procedures that they sent out that look pretty interesting too. So, all right.
Already on it.
One more thing, Chris. I just got a text message. First Care Urgent Care on Reading Road at North Street, I believe it is
Yeah.
doing antibody tests for $95 payment up front.
Oh,
Okay.
that's good to know.
Yeah, there's you get what you pay for, so be careful, okay? That's all I got to say about that, because there's some people out there that are looking just to make some money. Next committee service, Chairman, Mr. Albrecht.
Thank you, Mr. President. This morning, I went down to my sister's house because she had water in the basement. The sump pump that MSD put in was working. It was just, there was just too much water and it couldn't handle it. So she called MSD, they came out and they drained a little bit, but then they left. So hopefully it's receding now. At that time, or after I left there, I did go to look at the Mill Creek over on Benson as well as on Columbia. And like Mr. Gerds mentioned, I don't believe I've seen it that high in a very, very, very long time. It reminded me when I went back to Koenig Park of the days when Koenig Park would flood, and that was a fight at that time. So there were some rather large ponding that was going there and over on the BYO fields, and then back at the end of Riesenberg Lane. So I guess we had a heck of a lot of water, and you know, this is just another reason too. I think last time we had a meeting, I mentioned to people to clean their gutters, or not their gutters, but the drains in the gutter, because if the water can't get in, it can't be taken out by the system. So if you do have something in front of your house, if you do have a drain there and there's leaves or grass or whatever blocking it, go out and take it and put it on your lawn or put it in your garbage or something, but get rid of that so that the sewers can do the job that they've been designed to do. So obviously there was just a heck of a lot of water, and hopefully we'll get a little break here, and then maybe it won't rain tonight, but hopefully it'll go down. So I'm sure the service department has been out. And I guess finally, I want to offer my condolences to the family of John Boguski. That's the way you say it, Boguski.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I pronounced it.
But you know, it's really unfortunate, but because he was a really, really good employee. He was well trained. He was head of, in effect, the water department, and the service department and the city is certainly going to miss him. So again, we offer our condolences to his family.
Any questions for Mr. Albrink?
I think it might be appropriate. I'm sorry to jump in, but I guess, Denny, that Kathy's house where you grew up, of course, that Mill Street is underneath of it has the continuation, the main interceptor sewer that carries all the sewage all the way from the north down through Reading and then eventually down Pike Street into the main interceptor that's under the Mill Creek. But I think we at least ought to compliment the Metropolitan Sewer District. They, over the last 10 years, I think they're putting a third unit up there where when we have these heavy rains, it would surcharge into the sanitary sewer, and that's why you get back up through the basement. But they have worked very hard in trying to achieve these. And I saw several homes that we had flooding here about 20 years ago that the Metropolitan Sewer paid for them. They have a valve that will not allow the water in the sanitary sewer to back up into the house. It shuts itself off. It won't let it out into your house. And they have built 3 big silos. One of them is actually a water treatment plant, a small one up on the north end, which used to be our well field. They bought the property from us, actually. But I have to give them credit over the last 20 years. Now they are under the gun because the federal government's making them do it. But I didn't hear anything about people getting sewage back up too much around Vine Street and Mill. Now, if it did, I didn't catch it. It's possible they did. But so we are making, believe it or not, progress over these years.
Yeah, I think that a while back we wanted to do something, or MSD wanted to do something with that sewer, but that sewer was just so full and ran full all the time. And so they were going to have some real problems being able to, I guess, put another system in or whatever, but that probably needs to be done. And, you know, put a companion sewer in there and get the water over there. So, but we've had problems down there forever and ever.
That's true.
Unfortunately, they did put a lot of backflow valves in, Tony, but unfortunately, some of the people I've talked to today, the sewage is coming up through their basement toilet. So the backflow valve is great. It's not letting anything in, but it's going in another place.
Well, you got to be careful. You can't use your toilet facilities or anything if the valve is stopping the water from coming in. So obviously the sewage can't get out either. So you got to be sensible about it. But
it's coming in though. It's not trying to be flushed out. It's coming in through the toilet. Happened again last 100-year flood we had.
I think I ought to get them checked because the ones that are down on Harms Avenue, Elm Street, the ones that put them in, and we saw a few of them today on Market Street, a couple of locations. They've always been pretty effective. I guess they had to be maintained. I can't answer that question. I mean, but Danny's correct. There's the main interceptor sewer that why it comes in that direction. It comes down under the Mill Creek. It crosses over through Canning Park, down through St. Pierre and Paul's property, and then down Mill Street. When it hits Pike Street, it makes an abrupt right turn and goes back down under the Mill Creek. So that was constructed. That was even before my time. So probably 100 years ago that was done.
Pipes are pretty old.
But I mean, it's better. I have not gotten, I don't know. I've tried to follow up on it today. I'm not allowed to call the safety service director directly because I have to go through the chief of public works directly. So I have to go through the safety service director, but I was unable to get some direct answers to how much people got back up, but I didn't get any personal calls from the area of Vine Street. There we used to have trouble with water going down Vine and it was going in. We've separated a lot of the combination sewers, so that has helped. But I mean, as bad as it was, it used to be worse, believe it or not.
All right, thank you, Mr. Albrecht, and then Recreation, Mr. Lynn.
Thank you very much. At this time, we do not have a date for the pool to be open. We're still working on some of the mandates that the state set up to make sure that we meet all the guidelines. But I want everybody to know that Reading is committed to opening the pool sometime this year. I also like to just talk about a few things about the ordinance about transferring money from the stadium fund. I'm not sure, but is it the city agreement when it came to that? My understanding was that it's to go into the stadium fund with the city school. So any money that we collect goes back into improving the stadium. Do you know of that?
You're asking me, Tom?
I am.
Yeah, my recollection was that it was an annual thing where it was a specific amount. I don't remember. It was like 15,000 or something. But what research I did, and I know Sabrina's not here this evening. I don't know if Mel can add anything to it. But my understanding is any money that's come in now has all gone into the stadium fund, which really was for, as Don mentioned, even from the Reading Little Leaguers Ursuline Academy that was using the facilities. It was all maintenance money for all practical purposes of the putting into the stadium fund. And that fund has not been, to my recollection, they haven't been putting neither the city or the school, to my understanding, has been putting their annual contribution into the to build for a future track. Now, why that hasn't continued, I can't answer that question. But what research I did is was mostly for maintenance that went into the account, which really, as Don pointed out, I think it really should have went into the general fund, because all of the maintenance of the facility, the cleaning, the watering, the cutting of the grass, the linings, whatever we do in various parts of the city was all put into the stadium fund, which really should have been put into the general fund. As we talked, I don't want to steal Mel's thunder, but we can move funds, as the ball director, again, he may want to talk about it, from funds, and you can put it back when we become very solvent again.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Lynn?
Mr. Linderman had his hand up. Would you like to?
Go ahead, Mr. Linderman.
Yeah, Tom, if you look at the budget that we just approved here not too long ago, the only amount of money that goes into the stadium fund is $2,500 from the city.
$2,500 from the city that they've got from the city school to rent the stadium.
No, $2,500 from the city. It's not 25,000. It's 2,500. That's the only amount that's for the stadium to be put in by the city this year. $2,500.
Is it your understanding?
I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
I thought it was your understanding, Don, that the money that's been going in there has been coming from the use of the property for tenants and so forth. That was for maintenance. Is that your understanding?
yes, absolutely. So I don't know.
That's my understanding, right? So the city, the school pays to use the stadium, and then that money goes back to improving the stadium.
It goes back for the maintenance. If you look at the agreement, it's for the maintenance. So when the Public Works Department spends 4 hours dragging the fields over Canning Park, or putting down lime, or spending money on the water to water the grass at the stadium, that money should be coming out of that $25,000. I mean, that just makes sense, doesn't it?
I would agree with that, but I think then that's something that the service department needs to look at when they.
But it has to go into the general fund to do that, Tom, because no money has been coming out of the stadium fund. They haven't paid for anything for several years from the stadium fund. I think that's why he's making the transfer, which makes sense. And as he said, we can always make another transfer in the future if some project comes up that the council agrees on needs to be paid for. Right now, I think we have more serious problem on income than we do having $100,000 sit in the stadium fund.
Mr. Fischescher.
Yeah, I think a couple things have to be pointed out. Number one is that a couple of times now, people have thrown out the term that it shouldn't be in there and it shouldn't have been put in there. That's their opinion. There is no ordinance that says it couldn't be put in there. Number two, you know, has anybody checked with administration and asked them why it was put in there? And I kind of agree with Tom that, you know, I have no problem in moving that money. I agree that it should be moved, but I don't want people who are listening to get the idea that this was, quote, a screw up by administration. It is not. You know, that was their choice to put it in there.
Well, they're following the contract. My understanding, that was the agreement with the school that they set up, that it does go into the stadium fund to make future improvements. That was my understanding, that all rentals go back into the stadium fund so they can make improvements. Going back to Mr. Linderman, I would assume, yeah, dirt, you know, lining the field, all that's improvements. So some of that should be taken out, I would agree. But obviously it was set up for that to go into the stadium fund. So I would like to talk to administration before we make a transfer of money, that we shouldn't be transferring, you know, there was a reason it was put there, that maybe we should explore that a little more though.
First of all, if I can comment, I don't think there's any requirement that the contract for maintenance required the money to go into a stadium fund. It should have been gone into maintenance, and the service department or the chief of public works, they have no control over disposition of monies. That's all something that comes through the administration. And I don't agree necessarily that they have the arbitrary right to move it wherever they see fit. That contract called for the money to be spent for the maintenance of the facility. And the original, well, if you go back far enough and look at the stadium fund when it was created, as I mentioned to you, the real reason it was created was to have the school and the city put a proportionate amount of money in each year, not for maintenance, for capital improvements only. Now, if that's in there and you can find it, then maybe that should stay. But that was not a large sum of money, and it was to hopefully accumulate over a period of years money from separate from maintenance. It was something to be not for the use of the facility, because there were other people using the facility many years ago. You had, as I mentioned often, you had Little Leaguers, you had Ursuline Academy, you had St. Peter and Paul, you had Sacred Heart, you even had St. Michael's, you had Mount
Notre Dame.
Yeah, Mount Notre Dame before they built their facility up there. And at one time, even Moeller High School was renting the facility, and all that money was really supposed to go into the general fund. Maybe there's better communication with. I don't believe that there's any right of the administration. That's, if you want to digress to a different issue, that's like the money that comes in for grants. I intend to address that hopefully in the near future. But grant money that came in for creating a use for something in athletics doesn't belong in the FEMA fund, but that's where they put it. I think that was an arbitrary decision that's wrong, but I haven't gotten far enough to explore it in detail enough to make an amendment to that. But there has to be an opportunity to put some money over into the general fund where I believe it truly belongs. And as was mentioned, if we become in a position where we have many other income items, if we redevelop the PNC property and we have a windfall of cash, we can always put some money into, you could take it from the sewer service fee fund and put it back in there if we want it. But I think there has to be a more specific idea of how it's to be used in the stadium fund. And that was not my understanding from years ago when it was created.
Okay. Anything else on that subject? Anything else, Mr. Lynn?
That's fine. I'm complete.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lynn. Has everybody gotten in any new business that they wanted for the city? Everything's been talked through? Anything new? Anything else?
I had a couple items when we're finished. I had a resident call me about a problem. I'd like to just bring it up after we're finished. If we're good.
Well, yeah, we have time for things that aren't city business.
Right.
We go to reports of officials. Carla, will you go ahead and read Mr. Ross's report at this time?
Sure. Okay. Condolences to the family of John Boguski, passed away suddenly last Monday. John was hired in 2015. He was quickly promoted after completing his water license. Last December, John was given a job promotion to the head of the water utility department. John will be greatly missed by the entire Reading community, especially John's wife, Jen, and their 4 children, Kyla Marie, McKinley Ann, Brinley Nicole, and Stella Elizabeth. State of Ohio and Ohio Department of Health have given guidelines for opening of several businesses and services. One area given approval were for public schools, or pools, I'm sorry. Mandatory and recommended guidelines have been issued, and we are discussing these and will be discussing further with Hamilton County Department of Health as to whether we will be able to open and be in compliance with these guidelines. We will do our best to communicate any decisions. Bennett Kotler has been working with a property owner in Village of Laughlin who has a great need for fill dirt, or for dirt fill. There are a few hurdles for this property owner that has run into, so he's working with 2 other businesses and property owners to move the dirt for the bench project. I reached out via Center for Local Government if any other local governments have a need. MSD easement check should be cut either this or next Friday. American Legion has notified the city that they will not be holding their festival and fireworks. And as businesses and restaurants begin opening, please support our local businesses and do so in a safe manner.
Thank you very much, Ms. Kotcher. Law Director, Mr. Stevenson.
Thanks, Chris. I have a couple of things. While we were chatting earlier before about the basement cleanups, I sent a link to the sewer backup page for the Metropolitan Sewer District to each of you. That link goes directly to their online sign-up page. I also sent it to Mr. Ross. My guess is you can put it on the website, or he can put it on the website fairly quickly. But all of you should have that linked in an email that I sent to you earlier in the meeting. Mayor's Court is now open. We had our first session today. It went fairly well. There were some kinks that we're going to have to work out. We are doing the Mayor's Court at least through June and probably July at Hayfie Fieldhouse. One of the reasons we're doing it down there is we're able to socially distance as required by the governor and the director of health orders, and also from guidance from the Supreme Court of Ohio, which mandates that we have the ability to do that. We had a fair number of people show up today, but the line moved fairly quickly. We are not going to have another court in May. Our next court is June 9th, and we plan on doing it the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th Tuesdays of the month, like we did before the shutdown. And other than that, I have nothing else.
Okay.
Dave, how did it go? Pretty smooth?
Tony, I mean, there were some things that need to be worked out, but actually all things considered, it went very well. There's some acoustical issues that we have to deal with. But in terms of getting people in and getting them processed and getting them moved out, it went very well. Frankly, Michelle Nash deserves some kudos for making sure that happens, along with everybody that helped her put that together.
Well, I was thinking on a more permanent basis, something of that nature may come to fruition, but hope that can be explored.
Tony, I am frankly kind of open to that. There's a lot more parking up there. The real question is going to come, when we start using Hayfie Fieldhouse in a more deliberate manner when this virus subsides. Right now, we can leave things in place because we're not using it. Frankly, there's a lot more room and a lot more ability for us to space people out, even if we were to add chairs. Today, people stood in line. They primarily patient. We had problems with one young lady who didn't want to be patient, But by and large, everybody was polite, respectful, understood the circumstances, and we processed them through. And as all of you know, our mayor's court is not designed to inflict heavy punishment on anybody. It's more a court of compliance than it is a punishment, and that's kind of where we're at with it. And I think our citizens understand that as well.
Fine.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson, unless someone else has anything else. And let's see, anybody else? Oh, Treasurer, Mr. Gertz.
Yeah, you're not going to forget me, are you,
No,
Chris?
I'm not going to forget you.
Just a brief update for everyone. As of close of business today, for the month of May, we've collected $461,146. So as of today, as compared to last year, we're still about 38,500 short. And for the entire month, we're still about 103,500 short, but we still have 7 more business days. So I'm hopeful that this month is going to be a lot closer than it has in the past couple of months. So, and then as I've said in the past, excuse me, as I've said in the past, the money we're running behind since all of the due dates have been extended for tax collections. We're hoping to get, a big portion of that back before the end of July or mid-July, July 15th. So, I'll keep everybody posted. So far, I think collections have, given everything that's going on, I think they've gone pretty well this month, to be honest with you. Yes, we're running behind, but, like I said, I'm hopeful that we're going to at least hit our numbers from last May before the end of this month. The only other thing, and again, I missed the last Friday meeting. I had another appointment that I had to attend, but in terms of moving all this money around, I know that there was discussion, and I had a follow-up discussion with Shannon about that meeting. And Dave, you can jump in on this too, but my understanding is if there was an emergency here in the short term, we can borrow money or transfer money from existing funds into the general fund or whatever fund we need it in to meet our obligations. And then we can pay that back or move money back at a later date. And then over and above all of that, as we mentioned in the past, we have made contact with a couple of different financial sources where we could, in a matter of 3 to 4 weeks, we could work on a line of credit. And we've tossed around some numbers, a few $1 million, $3 million, if it were to be needed. And we've talked to institutions that said they could work very closely with us to make that happen. So we've got some options here. I'm just hopeful that our collections are going to continue to. I don't think we're going to catch up completely, to be perfectly honest with you, because of some of the people that have been furloughed or laid off or didn't get their bonuses, etc. But I think a major portion of that is that we're going to collect that money before July 15th. So, and I'll keep everybody posted, bi-weekly as we continue to have the meetings. So that's really all I've got for tonight, unless anybody else has any other questions.
Mel, I want to address something that you said. When we talk about moving money, there are different kinds of methods of doing that. A transfer is something that's usually pretty difficult because you're taking money from Peter to pay Paul, and it's usually considered permanent. What you're talking about is really not a transfer, it's more of an advance. And we're allowed to advance money from one fund to another to cover payroll, to cover other things that have come up. And with the idea that that money will be returned to the fund from which it came relatively soon. transfer is more of a permanent event, which is why generally when we transfer money from, say, a capital account to the general fund, we have to go to court to actually get that done. We can advance it from a capital fund to the general fund, but we have to pay that back to the capital fund. I just want to clear that up. It's just, these are legal words.
No, I appreciate that. And the point I was trying to make is that it's not like all of a sudden we're going to find ourselves high and dry, that we've got resources that we can go back to use funds, in an advance mode or in a line of credit mode to meet the obligations that we have. So,
Well, we have cash. We're not
I appreciate the additional.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
All right.
Any other questions?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Gertz. Reading of any resolutions?
You're welcome.
Carla, you're on mute.
There we go. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, there are none.
Okay, and then reading of any we don't have previous ordinances anymore. Reading of our first ordinance.
An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to purchase respiratory fit test equipment for the fire department and declaring an emergency.
Motion to
Motion
suspend the
to
rules
suspend the
for the
rules.
second and third reading.
I'll second.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lindeman, second by Ms. Edichico to suspend the rules that require a second and third reading. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischesser,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
Motion to
Motion to
adopt.
adopt. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Powell, seconded by Mr. Lindeman to adopt the ordinance. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischesser,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted in the ordinance number.
2020-19.
All right, our second ordinance.
An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to purchase mobile data communications equipment for the fire department and declaring an emergency.
Motion to suspend the rule requiring a second and third reading.
I'll
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Fischesser, seconded by Mr. Powell to suspend the rule that requires a second and third reading. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
so yes.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischesser,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
That motion passed.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Lindeman, seconded by Mr. Fischesser to adopt the ordinance for the mobile data communications. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
He worded yes, I think I saw. Was that a yes, Mr. Lindeman?
Mr.
Yes.
Fischesser,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
That ordinance is adopted in the ordinance number
2020-20.
2020. Like triple vision. Next ordinance, please.
An ordinance authorizing the payment of funds in the amount of
Yep.
$950 from the Capital Improvement Fund to pay interest on the dump truck acquisition bond and declaring an emergency.
Motion
Motion
to suspend
to
the second,
Suspend
third
the rule
reading.
requiring a second and third.
Second.
Who did the second?
Me.
Albrecht,
Okay. Motion made by Mr. Lynn, seconded by Mr. Albrecht to suspend the rule. It requires a second and third reading. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman.
Yes,
Okay.
sorry.
Mr. Fischescher,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes. Motion to adopt.
Second. Second.
Motion made by Ms. Edichico, second by Mr. Albring to adopt the ordinance. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes,
Mr. Fischescher,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
The wonders of Zoom.
That the ordinance is adopted, the ordinance number.
2020-21.
All right. And then the late addition here, I hope everybody's had a chance to discuss it tonight and think about it. If you read that ordinance, please.
An ordinance directing the transfer of $100,000 from the stadium fund to the general fund and declaring an emergency.
I'll move to suspend the rules.
Discussion, please.
And Mr. Powell.
Just a quick question as far as the general fund. Do we anticipate it remaining solvent for the near future?
Yeah. Is this necessary to move the money at this time? That's a good question.
Yeah. That question.
I believe that it is. We had that meeting on Friday. I mean, Mel, whether or not he wasn't there, but they're going to have to meet several payrolls, and they're trying to make sure it's solvent. I can tell you what's in the general fund right now, $700,000 as of May the report that I have in May the 15th, and there's 154,000 in the earnings tax fund. So, in talking with the treasurer and the auditor's office on Friday, they were preferably, in my opinion, from our discussion, that we continue to make sure we put adequate monies in there to meet the current obligations. So my opinion would be yes. Quite frankly, we're out of order because there was no second, but that's okay.
Yeah, and just so you know, as I've said in the past as well, payroll is $500,000, which will be approaching here, early June. So that's a big chunk of that.
My concern is, if you recall, Sabrina said that May is a 3 payday month. So we still have another payday in May to go.
Right.
We won't be meeting again between now and then. So, that would be the only thing that I would, but I do like, Tom, the idea of being able to put money back in there when things settle back down. And I think it's a discussion that we can't, forget about, and we need to have down the road.
So I have a motion made by Mr. Gertz to suspend the rule requires a second and third reading.
I'll second it.
Seconded by Mr. Fischescher. Roll call.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
No.
Mr. Albrecht,
No.
Mr. Lindeman,
yes,
Mr. Fischescher,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
No.
That motion didn't pass, so we will have a second reading in our first Tuesday of June. At this time, any other business? Mr. Gertz.
Yes. I would like, if you could, Mr. Fischesser, get a hold of Mr. Dwight Dom. You probably know him. He lives on Galbraith Road. I do have his phone number. I don't want to announce it at the meeting if you want to call me. He's having quite a problem with traffic and movement up there. And there's been several wrecks in his area there. And I don't know what the solutions are. Some of his idea was to put in traffic bumps. And I told him I didn't think that was a possibility, but he had some other ideas. But as a constituent, he's very concerned. If you could follow up from the safety department and with Chief needs and see whether or not there's anything that can be done. I'd certainly appreciate it, and I know he would too. Secondly, I thought Mr. Albrink would bring this up, but we do have a retirement coming up in June. Mr. Knizner, I believe, is going to retire, and with the loss of the gentleman that passed away suddenly, we're going to be down 2 more people in the service department, and I think we do need to explore the need to try and hire some additional people. I guess we do need to see where we stand. I don't have any problem with that. As I mentioned earlier, we do have other monies that we can draw from the sewer service fee fund, but I am concerned that in the water department, this is Mr. How do you say it, Denny? I'm sorry, I mispronounced it. Bukaria?
Not even close.
Oh, well, I'm sorry, he passed away, and I regret that because I don't know how to pronounce it. I apologize for that, but regardless, we're probably going to need some people in there. I think that ought to be explored aggressively. And lastly, I don't know if we can have court in the field house, and you can go and have a drink now and on outside bars, and tomorrow, what is it, Thursday, we can go inside. I think we ought to move these meetings back to council chambers where they belong.
Who's not going to show up because it's 10 people?
They had court today. You can have sit 10 feet apart if you want to. I mean, I don't see that being a problem, Randy. I mean, we don't have to sit next to each other up there. I don't think Tom and Dave probably would prefer to sit farther away anyway. I'm kidding, but this is cumbersome. You can't get citizen participation. There are people that was coming regularly to the meetings, and I think that it was more effective in our ability to conduct ourselves as city officials. And so that would be my opinion. I guess we can investigate that. But if they can have as many people they had in the field house for court, I don't think they're going to get people upset with having fewer people than that in a council chamber of the room that's probably 50 by 50, I'm guessing, or 40 by 40.
Yeah, my understanding, just from working at the Board of Elections, is that 10-person limit, as long as you're doing social distancing, everybody's a minimum of 6 foot apart in any direction, then it's okay. I mean, we're already talking about in-person voting. We got a special election in August, then we've got another, obviously, the presidential election in November. And the assumption now is we're going to do in-person voting. So we're already working on how do you control the number of people that come in to a space? How do you maintain the social distancing so that you're following all rules? But I don't think that 10 people in a room is going to matter anymore as things open up. It's my understanding. I do have one other, and Patrick is not here, but I do have one other question, or not a question. I just want to make sure. I haven't heard of any dates yet for the official reopening of City Hall to the public. It's been closed for a long time to the public. But when we do reopen, I know like the folks in my department, the deputy treasurers, they're always wearing gloves when they're handling mail. But once we start going to open to the public, there's got to be special cleaning that's happening regularly with Lysol wipes and all that sort of thing. And it's not just once a week. It's got to be done multiple times a day. I think the city should be providing every employee in there that has to deal with the public facial masks. And you'll go through boxes of those things because I've seen it happen over the last couple months. But anyway, I was going to call Patrick and talk to him about it. But that's another, I'm assuming somebody's thinking about this, but I haven't heard any dates or timelines of when we were going to open up to the public again. But we just got to make sure we're properly prepared and can handle the public coming into the building.
Yeah, you make and you continue to make the point, Mr. Gertz, that you would like to have the the meeting there. I don't see the same feedback from the rest of council that supports that idea. I myself would like to see this whole opportunity for the country to go to and take the risk before I take the risk personally to go back. And I'm waiting to see what happens in June.
Well, that's your opinion, and I don't agree with you. I think that it's, I'm not concerned as maybe you are with that. You can, the council could appropriate money for you to have a plastic mask or whatever you want to have on yourself to attend the meetings. But I think this method is, even when some of us, I don't know if I'm talking now that it's breaking up, but people are breaking up. When they talk, it's confusing. It's not, to my opinion, it's not as effective as it would be if we were actually in our council chambers. And ICRC can be more effective, I think, too, in presenting it to the citizens in a better fashion. But that's my opinion, and I guess.
We do live in a republic.
Yeah, we got our freedoms. I don't like being cooped up in an office all day.
Well, yeah, you could always take your computer down and sit in chambers and get on.
Oh, you're getting ridiculous. If you don't want to come, don't come. I mean, when you were working up in wherever, you miss half the meetings anyway. What's the difference? Fish has
Now that might not be true, Tony.
Well, look at the
half the meetings.
I don't know. There were a lot of them when you weren't there. So if you don't feel comfortable, don't come for a month or two. Let Fish has to run the meeting. He doesn't.
I don't want to come either, Tony. I don't want to be wearing a mask forever. And
I don't want to catch COVID and have 5 years from now find out my heart is going to give up because I had that.
Well,
we don't know what the long-term effects are. We don't know what the short-term effects are. We don't know what the effects are on the young. We don't know what the effects are on our immune system. We don't know nothing.
Well, I guess
I do.
I guess it takes time to have the meeting. We ought to have a resolution or an ordinance.
Well, like Randy said, he'll resign first, and I probably will too.
If you want to resign, that's your prerogative.
I didn't say I wanted to resign. I don't want to go to city council while this epidemic is still going on in this fashion, period.
I think some of us have a difference of opinion. We're opening up a lot of places, and I think it would behoove us to.
And they may not be doing that very smartly either.
That's your opinion. I think this you got to open up the economy. You got to open up operations of the city, and we got to open up.
Well, Chris, you put a questionnaire out at one point. What was the result of that as far as having the skipping the second and fourth meeting and not meeting in City Hall?
Well, I could interpret them as 6-1, but if I say the fence sitters don't count as a positive or a negative, it would probably be 4-2-1. 4, not to go in the council chambers. 2, whatever we want to do for that. These was just for the second and fourth meetings, right? This was just for the second and fourth meetings too.
Well, that was in the middle of, that was like 6 weeks ago or 8 weeks ago, in the middle of the whole epidemic.
Well, pardon me, but we're still in the middle of it.
Well, I don't agree with you. That's what I'm saying. And I guess it's up to the members of council what they want to do.
Sound like Trump.
I agree with Trump. You can dislike him all you want.
Okay, well, there's 2 opinions on the floor. When the rest of council wants to discuss it, we will.
I'm not opposed to discussing this.
Well, you got 2 extremes. You can go. You can voice your opinion somewhere in the middle or at both ends. Doesn't matter. And if you don't want to say anything, it sounds like just a no vote. Mr. Lindeman.
Are we going to talk about this more, or are we going to go on?
The meeting's about to be adjourned, so if you want to talk about this some more, you go right ahead. If not, it'll probably end the meeting.
Well, I have a few other ideas.
Okay.
The VYO, and of course the American Legion, it was announced tonight, the VYO and the American Legion will not have their festivals. They, that's a big dollar hit to both of those organizations. So I'll mention again that if you want to make a donation, they're certainly willing to accept it. And I think that would be generous to do that. The other thing is we're not going to have a Memorial Day parade, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't display the flag on Memorial Day. That would be also appreciated.
Can I add a little bit to that? Katie should be complimented on a project that she spearheaded I think it was T-shirts, right, Katie?
Right.
To raise money for the VYO. It was pretty successful, and I think you were up around $1,000, somewhere around there. So you should really be complimented on that.
Yeah, the T-shirts were delivered today, so we got the list from Rick Baskey. He's the one who came up with the idea for the shirts and printed them for us, and then we're gonna hopefully have a day, it's probably looking like Thursday, that will be at the field house where we can distribute it to everybody that ordered. I'd like to get them out before Memorial Day weekend so people can take pictures of them and T-shirts, post it on social media to support BYO, and then you can still make a donation as well too at Valley Central, or they also have a Venmo account. So, but yeah, we did raise $1,000. That'll be the checks coming in the mail from Rick, and then we'll take that over to Valley Central for them too.
That's great.
I'd just like
Thank
to,
Mr.
I
Ulrich?
just like to make a comment on something that Mr. Gertz said earlier. I know a while back we talked about trying to hire another person for the service department, a person basically who would be a mechanic. I think that is still something that we need to do, especially now. And I believe they already have the person in mind that they would like to hire. So I would like, hopefully the administration will proceed with that. And then of course, with John Boguski's passing, just to get back to where we were, they probably need to look at another person also. So hopefully that can take place and take place soon.
Reminder about the blood drive on the 21st at Reading High School also.
Okay. Anything else from anyone?
What time is the blood drive?
You call Hawksworth Blood Center and you could schedule an appointment, but I understanding there's ones in the afternoon and then there's ones in the evening, and you can schedule an appointment when to come in.
All right. Thank you, everyone, again. And hopefully we won't be on Zoom too much longer. And maybe we can even get back to 4 meetings a month at some point also. So have a good
So our next meeting is going to be on the 2nd, will it?
Should be June 2nd.
2nd of June.
Yes, yes, June 2nd will be the next meeting.
Thank you.
And I will send out the meeting ID early, and then I'll get it out that same day for anyone who misplaced it, and go from there. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tony, can you send me Mr. Dom's phone number, please?